I am Esther, and this is my story. The perfume room in the citadel of Susa smells of myrrh and crushed almond oil, and even now, years after I first walked its marble floors as a frightened girl from the house of Mordecai, I still cannot enter it without remembering the trembling in my hands. But that is not where this part of my story begins. It begins with silence. The particular silence of a palace that does not yet know it is about to change. I had been queen for 5 years. 5 years of linen so fine it felt like water against my skin, of gold cups I was almost afraid to hold, of a husband who was also a king, and who I loved in the strange, careful way one loves a man who could end your life with a lifted hand. Ahasuerus never knew I was a Jew. My cousin Mordecai, who raised me after my mother and father died and left me an orphan in a foreign land, had told me from the first day inside these walls, "Tell no one who you are or where you come from." I obeyed him the way a vine obeys the trellis it was tied to before it could choose otherwise. I did not yet understand that obedience would one day cost me everything and save everyone. It was my eunuch Hathach who first brought me the smell of ash on his sleeve, the smell of a city in mourning. He had gone into the outer court to bring me news of Mordecai, who I had heard was sitting at the king's gate in torn clothes, sackcloth against his skin, ashes in his beard. I remember pressing my hand to my chest as Hathach spoke, feeling my heart move like something trying to escape a cage. "My lord Mordecai gave me this," Hathach said, holding out a copy of a decree, "and told me to show it to you and to tell you everything." I unrolled it slowly. The script was formal, cold, official, the kind of writing that does not care whose blood it spills. Destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, women and children, in a single day. One day, the 13th of Adar. Every Jew in 127 provinces, from India to Kush, marked for slaughter. Men who baked bread beside me as a child, women who had taught me to braid wool, the old rabbi who used to bless children in the market square when I was small enough to be lifted onto my father's shoulders. My hands went cold before my mind caught up to why. I sent Hathach back with silver and fine cloth, some foolish, desperate part of me thinking Mordecai only needed comfort, not understanding yet that comfort was not what he was asking for. He refused the gifts. He sent back a message instead, and its words have never left me. "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape." I read those words standing very still in my chamber, my maids around me pretending not to watch my face. Outside, I could hear laughter from the courtyard. Some minor official's daughter was being married that week, and the palace did not yet know that beneath its music, a whole people had been sentenced to die. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? I sat with that question longer than I have sat with any question before or since. Who knows? Not a command, not a guarantee. Just a door left open, and a whisper that maybe my whole strange, sorrowful, gilded life had been leading here. The dead mother I barely remembered. The father's house I lost. The night I was taken to the palace, not knowing if I would live to see morning. Every one of those griefs suddenly looked less like wreckage and more like a road. I did not feel brave. I want you to know that, because so often bravery is imagined as a fire in the chest, and what I felt was closer to standing at the edge of a rooftop in wind. 30 days had passed since the king had called for me. To enter his inner court unsummoned meant death, unless he extended his golden scepter. And mercy, in that court, was a mood, not a law. I sent my answer to Mordecai with a hand that would not quite stop shaking as I dictated it. Gather all the Jews in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days and nights. My maids and I will fast as well. Then I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. If I perish, I perish. I said the words aloud once, alone, testing whether they would break me. They did not. They settled into me instead, like a keel settling into a ship before a storm. The fast was its own kind of wilderness. 3 days without food, without water, past a few careful sips. My mind circling the same narrow track. He may not raise the scepter. He may not even look at me. He may have already forgotten my face beneath the fear of it. I thought of Vashti, the queen before me, banished for a single refusal. I thought of every execution I had heard whispered about in these halls, quiet and swift as a curtain falling. And beneath the fear, strange and small and steady, I felt something else. Not certainty that I would live, but certainty that I was not alone in the dark. I could not have explained it to anyone. I'm not sure I can explain it now. But it was there, like warmth from a fire in another room. On the 3rd day I bathed, and my maids dressed me in my royal robes, and I remember looking at my own reflection in the polished bronze and barely recognizing the woman looking back. Not because she was unfamiliar, but because for the first time in 5 years, she was about to be entirely herself. I walked into the inner court alone. My sandals made no sound I could hear over my own pulse. The throne room opened ahead of me, vast and gold-lit, and there was Ahasuerus on his throne, and for one endless heartbeat he did not move. Then he lifted the golden scepter. I do not remember crossing the floor to touch its tip. I only remember breathing again, the whole room rushing back into focus. The guards, the incense, the king's face, softer now, almost curious. "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even to half the kingdom it will be given you." I did not ask for the deliverance of my people that day. I asked instead for a banquet, his presence, and Haman's. I have turned that decision over in my mind 1,000 times since, and I still believe it was not my own cleverness that stayed my tongue, but a patience given to me, a sense that the moment was not yet ripe, that the truth needed room to grow before it could be spoken safely. At that first banquet, wine warming the room, I asked for one more day, one more banquet, before I would finally say what was breaking my heart. That night, unable to sleep, the king had his chronicles read to him and discovered, by what I can only call the quiet hand of God working through the smallest, most unnoticed details, that Mordecai had once saved his life from an assassination plot and had never been rewarded. And so the very next morning, Haman, who had built gallows 50 cubits high specifically to hang my cousin, was forced instead to parade Mordecai through the city streets in royal robes, honoring the man he most wanted dead. I heard of it before the second banquet, and I remember laughing, a strange, wild, disbelieving laugh, tears running down into it, because I finally understood that we were not fighting this battle by our own strength at all. We never had been. At the second banquet, the king asked again, and this time, I did not delay. My voice shook, but it did not break. "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me for my petition, and my people for my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated." I watched the king's face change, confusion, then dawning horror. "Who is he? And where is he who has presumed in his heart to do this?" I lifted my hand and pointed across the table at the man reclining there in his fine robes, wine still on his lips. A foe, an enemy, this wicked Haman. I will never forget the sound the room made in that instant, not a gasp, but something quieter and more terrible, the sound of a mask falling. Haman's face went the color of ash. The king rose in fury and walked out into the garden, and Haman, in his terror, fell across my couch to beg for his life just as Ahasuerus returned, and it was misread as an assault, and that was the end of him. He was hanged that very day on the gallows he had built for Mordecai. I felt no triumph in it. I felt only the trembling aftermath of a storm passing, and underneath it, a grief for how close evil had come to swallowing everything I loved. But a death decree once sealed with the king's ring could not be unwritten, only answered. Mordecai and I worked through nights that blurred together, drafting a new edict giving the Jews throughout the empire the right to defend themselves, to fight back on the very day appointed for their slaughter. Riders went out on royal horses to the furthest provinces, and when the 13th of Adar came, our people, once condemned, stood and lived. Grief turned, as Scripture says, into gladness, and mourning into a holiday. I am Esther. I was an orphan, and then I was hidden, and then I was afraid, and then, for one unbearable, holy moment, I was asked to risk everything I had been given for the sake of people who could give me nothing back. I learned that courage rarely feels like courage while you are living it. It feels like trembling hands, and a decision made anyway. I learned that God's providence often moves silently, through sleepless nights and forgotten records and the quiet timing of ordinary days, long before anyone can see his hand at work. And I learned that we are none of us placed where we are by accident. If you are reading this and wondering whether your own life, your own strange, sorrowful, unlikely road, could possibly be leading toward a purpose, I want you to hear what I have carried with me every day since. You do not have to feel brave to be brave. You only have to be willing, in the moment it is asked of you, to say, if I perish, I perish, and then walk forward anyway. Who knows whether you have not come to this very place, this very hour, for such a time as this,